Burnout is not a result of working too hard. If that statement sounds incorrect to you, it is because you are looking at the wrong variable. We have all had days where we worked 14 hours on a passion project and felt energized. Yet we have also had days where we worked 4 hours on a bureaucratic nightmare and felt destroyed. The variable that changed was not the effort, it was the return on investment. Neuroscience does not classify burnout as a weakness or a lack of grit. It classifies it as a prediction error, specifically a chronic negative reward prediction error. Your brain is a prediction engine. It constantly runs a quiet equation. Given this amount of energy expenditure, what is the expected return? When reality consistently undershoots that expectation, your biological hardware draws the only logical conclusion it can. It stops funding the operation. Today, we are going to audit that equation. We are not talking about self-care or bubble baths. We are looking at the math of motivation. Think of your motivation system not as a spirit or a mood, but as a venture capitalist residing in your midbrain. Its job is to allocate finite resources, glucose, attention, and time, to behaviours that yield a profit. If a startup keeps burning cash without launching a product, the VC pulls the funding. That is exactly what happens during burnout. The venture capitalist in your head cuts the line. This state is often misdiagnosed as depression or laziness, but mechanically, it is a protective strategy. Your system is refusing to spend expensive biological currency on a transaction that has a history of failing. To fix this, we cannot just use willpower. Willpower is just an emergency override switch, and switches burn out if you hold them down too long. We need to look at the ledger itself. If you are interested in debugging human behavior using engineering principles rather than motivational fluff, you are in the right place. We treat the brain as a machine with specific specs and limitations. If that sounds like a useful operating system for your life, make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you do not miss the next system update. Now, let us look at the first component of the burnout equation: reward prediction error. There is a pervasive myth in hustle culture that says if you just grind hard enough, success is inevitable. This implies a linear relationship. Input equals output. But biological systems are non-linear. The mechanism at play here is dopamine, but probably not in the way you think. Most people view dopamine as the pleasure molecule, the reward itself. That is technically inaccurate. In reinforcement learning theory, dopamine is a teaching signal. It measures the delta between expectation and reality. When you anticipate a reward and it arrives exactly as predicted, dopamine firing actually remains baseline. You do not get a spike for getting what you expected, you just get stability. The system says, the model is correct, keep proceeding. However, modern work environments rarely offer this stability. They offer high ambiguity. You put in the work, but the result is delayed, obfuscated, or cancelled. This introduces noise into the signal. Let us look at the specs. Midbrain dopamine neurons have 3 primary states. First is the positive prediction error. This happens when the outcome is better than expected. You anticipate a standard paycheck, but you get a bonus. Dopamine spikes. This rewires the brain to repeat the behavior. Second is zero prediction error. You do the work, you get exactly the agreed upon reward. Dopamine stays flat. The behavior is maintained, but not boosted. The third state is the killer, the negative prediction error. This occurs when the reward is worse than expected or fails to appear entirely. Dopamine firing dips below baseline. It creates a neurochemical void. This dip is not just a feeling of disappointment, it is a learning signal. It tells your neural circuits, this action is a bad investment. Do not do it again. If you trigger this negative error once, it is annoyance. If you trigger it daily for 6 months, it is structural damage to your motivational drive. Here is the trap. Your brain is running a primitive piece of software designed for immediate feedback loops. Hunt the animal, eat the food. Modern knowledge work breaks this loop. You work on a project for 3 months. That is 3 months of energy expenditure with 0 tangible reward signals. No food, no applause, no money until the very end. Your brain is constantly predicting a reward that does not arrive. It is registering a micro-negative prediction error every single day. The system starts to learn that the ledger never balances. It down-regulates motivation to save energy. You interpret this as losing your passion. But you did not lose your passion. Your internal actuary just looked at the books and froze the account. The cues that used to trigger excitement, a new email, a calendar invite, now trigger a defensive response because they have been statistically linked to a lack of payoff. If you think that dopamine crash is the worst part, wait until you see what it does to your error processing. When your dopamine baseline drops due to chronic negative prediction errors, your brain actually becomes more sensitive to future failures and less sensitive to future rewards. You enter a state of pessimistic bias. This isn't just an attitude, it is a recalibration of your senses. You effectively become blind to small wins, while small losses feel catastrophic. Most people try to push through this phase with caffeine and anxiety. This is a mathematical impossibility. You are trying to redline an engine that has cut its own fuel line. So, how do we patch this? We have to manually engineer positive prediction errors. Since we cannot force the external world to reward us instantly, we have to shrink the timeline. You must break projects down into units so small that success is guaranteed. I am talking about 45-minute cycles. If you write code for 45 minutes and complete one function, you must consciously acknowledge that as a win. You are forcing the ledger to balance on a micro scale. This prevents the dopamine dip. It keeps the baseline stable. It sounds trivial, but to a reinforcement learning system, frequency of reward often matters more than magnitude. 10 small hits of job done are more protective against burnout than one big hit of project finished 3 months from now. Let us move to the second variable, the Effort-Reward Imbalance model, or ERI. The common myth here is that if you are paid well, you have no right to be burned out. You hear this from older generations or disconnect managers. You make 6 figures, what are you complaining about? This assumes that money is the only currency the brain accepts. This is false. The ERI model, developed by medical sociologists, identifies 3 distinct currencies: financial, status, and socio-emotional. You can be paid $1 million a year, but if your job status is insecure, meaning you might be fired at any moment, or if you receive 0 esteem and recognition, the equation still resolves to a negative. Your brain monitors social standing and security with the same intensity it monitors food availability. Let us break down these 3 inputs. First, financial reward. This is straightforward. Second is status control. This involves promotion prospects and job security. If you are working hard, but the career ladder is broken or ambiguous, your brain registers high effort with 0 status accumulation. Third is esteem. This is respect, recognition, and fairness. Evolutionarily, lack of respect was a precursor to exile and death. So, when you work hard and are treated like a cog, it triggers a primal alarm. The ERI model shows that a deficit in any one of these domains can trigger the stress response. The combination of high effort and low reward in these non-monetary domains sustains a psychobiological stress reaction. This eventually leads to the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines. You literally become inflamed by the bad math. There is a multiplier effect in the ERI model called overcommitment. This is the internal glitch. It is the inability to withdraw mentally from work obligations. If you have high overcommitment, you are likely to maintain high effort even when the rewards are obviously absent. You are doubling down on a losing bet. This trait makes you an ideal employee in the short term and a guaranteed casualty in the long term. You keep pouring energy into the system, hoping that eventually the ledger will balance. But if the structural environment is flawed, if the organization simply does not have the capacity to reward you, your overcommitment just accelerates the depletion. You are running the engine at 7,000 RPM in neutral. This leads to a controversial conclusion. The gurus will tell you to push through the resistance. I am going to tell you to listen to it. Cynicism and quiet quitting are often demonized, but in the context of the ERI model, they are rational biological adaptations. If the input is greater than the output, the only way to save the organism is to reduce the input. Disengagement is your brain attempting to balance the books before you go bankrupt. If you feel yourself detaching, do not view it as a moral failure. View it as a system alert saying, ROI critical, initiating power-saving mode. To fix the effort-reward imbalance, you need to run a full audit. Take a piece of paper. On the left, list your efforts: hours, emotional labor, travel, stress. On the right, list your rewards: salary, security, esteem, growth. If the left side is heavy and the right side is light, you have two options. Option A is to demand more resources. Negotiate for money, yes, but also negotiate for title changes, public recognition, or clearer promotion criteria. Option B is to lower the effort side to match the current rewards. This is not laziness, it is calibration. Stop volunteering for high-effort, low-visibility tasks. Stop engaging in emotional labor that is not in your job description. Bring your output down until it matches the input. If the organization cannot pay you in currency or respect, do not pay them in burnout. We need to refine our variables further using the Job Demands Resources Model, or JDR. The myth here is that stress is just one big bucket. People say, I am stressed, as if it is a singular state. The JDR model splits this into two opposing forces, demands and resources. Demands are the physical and psychological costs: time pressure, difficult clients, noise, bureaucracy. These drain the battery. Resources are the things that recharge the battery: autonomy, feedback, social support, and learning opportunities. Burnout happens when demands consistently exceed resources. But here is the nuance. High demands alone do not cause burnout. You can work very hard and not burn out, provided your resources are equally high. This explains why a surgeon might work 12 hours and feel fine, while a call center worker works 6 hours and feels destroyed. The surgeon has autonomy and status. The call center worker has zero control. High job demands are the primary predictor of exhaustion, the energetic core of burnout. When you have high friction, like incompatible software, constant interruptions, or unclear instructions, you are paying a cognitive tax on every action. It costs more glucose and executive function to do simple tasks. Low job resources, on the other hand, drive disengagement. If you lack autonomy or feedback, the motivational system has no data to work with. It creates a vacuum. The worst-case scenario, confirmed by longitudinal studies, is the high-demand, low-resource quadrant. This is the kill zone. Your energy is being drained by demands, and there is no source of replenishment. The battery does not just run low, the chemical structure of the battery degrades. A specific trap in the modern workplace is the illusion of autonomy. You are told you own a project, which sounds like a resource. But if you have accountability without authority, that is not a resource. That is a demand. Being responsible for an outcome you cannot control is one of the most expensive computations the human brain can run. It creates a persistent error signal because you are constantly trying to solve a puzzle that has missing pieces. If your boss gives you a target but denies you the budget or the decision-making power to hit it, they are not giving you an opportunity. They are giving you a math problem that solves to negative infinity. This brings us to the most common and most useless advice for burnout. Take a vacation. If you take a battery that keeps short-circuiting and let it sit on a shelf for a week, it might cool down. But the moment you plug it back into the defective circuit, it will overheat again. A vacation fixes the acute exhaustion, but it does not fix the equation. If you return to the same high demands and low resources, you will burn out again within 2 weeks. The data supports this. We need to fix the circuit, not just cool the battery. The protocol for GDR is to manipulate the variables. If you cannot reduce demands, because the work is inherently hard, you must aggressively increase resources. The most potent resource is autonomy. You need to carve out pockets of control. If you cannot control the deadline, negotiate control over the method. If you cannot control the client, control the schedule. The second most vital resource is feedback. In the absence of feedback, the brain assumes the worst. You need to solicit feedback, even if it is just to confirm you are on the right track. This closes the loop. Finally, social support. This does not mean complaining to co-workers. It means instrumental support, asking for help with specific tasks. We often avoid this to appear competent, but in a high-demand environment, isolation is a vulnerability. Open the valve. Ask for the resource. We need to talk about the feeling of being stuck. Subjectively, this feels like wading through mud. You might think this sensation is the problem itself, something to be medicated or meditated away. But in our engineering model, this sensation is a dashboard light. It is data. When animals are placed in environments where effort does not lead to escape or reward, they exhibit learned helplessness. They eventually stop trying, even when an exit becomes available. The feeling of being stuck is your brain realizing that your agency has been compromised. It is calculating that movement equals cost, but movement does not equal progress. So it hits the brakes. Studies on dopamine during effortful tasks show a clear correlation. When difficulty increases, dopamine should actually ramp up to meet the challenge. But only if the predicted reward is reliable. If the reward is uncertain, dopamine drops as effort rises. This is the giving up mechanism. It is a safety feature to prevent you from wasting calories on a task that is likely impossible. In a stalled career or a chaotic company, you are triggering this safety feature. You are working hard, but the progress variable is 0. Your brain interprets this as pushing against a locked door. Eventually, it stops sending the signal to push. This is where we get the cynicism component of burnout, clinically known as depersonalization. You start treating clients like numbers and colleagues like obstacles. This feels like you are becoming a bad person. You are not. You are becoming an efficient machine in a bad environment. Depersonalization is a way to reduce the emotional cost of the work. If you stop caring, the work hurts less. It is an emotional callus. The trap is that while this protects you from pain, it also isolates you from the positive rewards of human connection, one of the few resources that could have saved you. You armor up so much that you cannot receive the signal even if it comes. To override the stuck signal, you must manufacture progress. If the macro goals are blocked, you cannot get the promotion, the project is stalled, you must shift focus to micro goals where you have 100% agency. Learn a new skill that is transferable. Optimize a spreadsheet for your own benefit. Clean up your file system. These sound trivial, but they provide a closed loop of effort to result. You do X and Y happens. This tells your dopamine system that your agency is intact. It reminds the machine that the controls still work. You are decoupling your sense of efficacy from the broken external system and reattaching it to your own internal development. You are not working for the company anymore. You are using the company's gym to build your own muscles. Let us summarize the ledger. Burnout is what happens when your biological expectation of reward is repeatedly violated. It is a negative prediction error compounded over time. It is an imbalance where effort exceeds the combination of money, status, and esteem. It is a state where demands crush resources. The solution is not to just rest. Resting while the math is broken just means you are rested for your next defeat. The solution is to fix the math. Reduce the friction. Increase the autonomy. Balance the books on a daily basis by recognizing small wins. And if the organization you are in makes it mathematically impossible to balance that ledger, if the demands are infinite and the resources are zero, then the only rational engineering decision is to migrate the system to a new environment. We have looked at the hardware and the software of burnout. Now it is time to run the diagnostics on your own life. Identify which variable is out of range. Is it the reward prediction, the effort-reward ratio, or the lack of resources? Once you isolate the variable, you can patch it. If you found this analysis useful, consider this a positive prediction error. The reward was higher than the cost of your attention. Subscribe to the channel to keep your internal models updated. I have more data coming on focus, sleep architecture, and the physics of learning. Until then, check your inputs, audit your outputs, and mind the math.